Good morning, Dr. Moroska.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to talk with you. We're here to talk about ultrafine particles, obviously. So, what are the major sources of ultrafine particles, indoors and out?
There are quite a number of them, and that's what we'll talk about first, about the sources, then we'll talk about the concentrations, about behavior of these particles in the atmosphere, and the relative importance. So, speaking about the sources, for the purpose of this discussion, we could divide them into the local combustion, secondary formation processes, and long-distance transport. And then it is indoor versus outdoor, so local combustion is of equal importance, whether it's indoor or outdoor, and secondary formation. Long-distance transport is obviously important for outdoor air. In the outdoor air, that local combustion, it means vehicles. Vehicle emissions by far the most important source of any types of pollutants in outdoor air, and of course of the ultrafine particles as well. So whichever, whether you are looking at traffic in any country, in any city, you see pictures like this, and you can relate this to your own city. And therefore, it is not surprising to see this kind of curve where you have traffic. This is the red curve, traffic, a typical camel-shaped curve. So you've got a hump in the morning and hump in the afternoon, morning and afternoon traffic. And then the blue curve is particle number concentration, which is basically ultrafine particles. And you can see that these particles follow very well traffic. These are the primary particles emitted from traffic, and that's why there's such a good correlation between one and the other.
Okay. So how does this differ very much depending on the environment that you measure it?
It differs to a certain extent because, remember, when we are outdoor, there are also other factors. There's wind, there's rain. So, for example, if we are standing near a road, but the wind is blowing towards the road, so therefore we won't see this exact impact on where we are standing. So it is a complicated environment, but basically if we just look at what's emitted on the road and the traffic flow rate, you see this kind of relationship basically everywhere.
And how do ultrafine particles behave in the atmosphere, and is this different from other types of particles?
They are immediately after emissions, they are transported by wind, by other factors away. One important factor is that when we are considering the distance and concentrations of ultrafine particles compared to particle mass, PM2.5 and PM10, there is much significantly higher concentrations and inhomogeneity in relation to particle number than particle mass. Particle mass is increased, say, by 20, 30, maximum 50% near the road compared to the urban background. Particle number could be anything up to 2 orders of magnitude. It's a huge difference, and therefore we see this kind of relationship. This comes from a literature review of studies published around the world. And we've got those studies classified according to the location. So starting from the right, we've got clean background, rural, urban background, urban, street, canyon, and so on, up to the tunnel. So just looking at the graph, you can see that there's an increase in the concentration from clean to the tunnel. But what's remarkable is when you look at the scale of the concentration, this is logarithmic scale, which means that the difference between clean and the tunnel, it's not just that increase, which you would sort of see intuitively, it is 2 orders of magnitude, 100 times. So this is quite significant.
Yes, stay away from traffic.
But when we are talking about outdoor sources, one important one is formation of secondary organic aerosol. In the first instance, we've got emissions from the vehicles, in addition to particles, over 4,000 of different compounds. Some of them are vapors. And then in a number of complex reactions, these vapors condense to form secondary organic aerosol. And here there is an alternative diagram to the one which we've discussed just a moment ago. So again, we've got time series, we've got the traffic count, the same camel type curve, but particle number concentration is doing something very different now. We don't see, or we hardly see, the peaks in the morning, in the afternoon, because there's much bigger peak in the middle of the day, which has nothing to do with the traffic. As you can see, it's not correlated in any way with traffic. It is formation of secondary particles in the air. And by number, this is quite a significant source. So in urban environments, particularly in places where particle mass is not large, which means there are not a lot of large particles providing surface for deposition for the ultrafine particles, we see increasingly this kind of behavior. So therefore, if we were to put this together, what's the contribution from the sources and also the resulting from the transport and behavior of this? In an urban environment of relatively clean cities, we are not talking about cities of the developing world when there's lots of particle mass. We've got up to 90% of particles in terms of number being in the ultrafine size range, and a large fraction of them is even in the smaller fraction of this, below 50 nanometers.
So can you explain to me the relative importance of traffic as opposed to other ambient sources like wood smoke or industry?
This is less quantified. First of all, in terms of wood smoke and biomass burning, this is something which doesn't necessarily occur all the time. These are often incidental situations or events of fire, or if it's wood burning for the purpose of heating, it's again seasonal. It is much less quantified in terms of contribution to particle number. It is a bit better quantified in terms of chemistry contribution, because that's how it is. It has been traditionally assessed, but not in terms of particle number. In terms of industrial contribution, it is even less information in relation specifically to the ultrafine particles. There have been a handful of studies. So the studies show that there is a contribution, but to put a global figure of what is the contribution compared to this figure, we don't have this kind of data.
So we know that traffic contributes heavily to the issue, and that for other sources of ultrafine particles we may need to do a lot more research.
We need to do a lot of more research. That's correct, yes.
And we don't know what effect they might have on human health.
Well, that's another issue on health. There's been quite a lot of studies, toxicological studies on ultrafine particles of health, less so epidemiological studies. And here is a very important point. In order to do epidemiological study or come with a so-called exposure-response relationship, we need to have a sufficiently big body of monitoring data. Such a body of monitoring data for PM10 and PM2.5 allowed us to develop health guidelines and then standards for PM10 and PM2.5. Without such a body of data for ultrafine particles, we can't really get to exposure.
So many questions still to be answered.
Many questions, that's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to be confused by the end of the day, I can tell.